Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your somber boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you at 10:33 p.m. on a Sunday night. After the Knicks have just played a basketball game, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But first, I'm going to introduce my esteemed co-host, who I can't wait to throw the first question of this pod towards him, Jeremy Cohen. Hello, Jeremy.
Hey, John. It's good to see you again.
It's so great to see you.
Yeah.
How many hours after we saw each other? 10 hours ago?
We just about. We started recording about 10 hours ago.
Yeah, well, we started 10 hours ago and then we finished 9 hours ago. And you know what we did, Jeremy, when we saw each other over that time? We recorded a really nice podcast. It was one of our best. It was top-notch podcasting, in which we talked glowingly about the Knicks and all of the wonderful things that they have been doing over the beginning of their season. And you will hear some of that podcast in a bit, the part that is still entirely relevant. But we are sitting here at now 10:34 p.m. on a Sunday night, re-recording the beginning of that podcast after the Knicks went and laid a big old poop burger on the court at MSG. And Jeremy, do you have a guess as to where I'm going to start this one?
I don't, John. Indulge me.
I asked you a question. It was actually the first question of the podcast earlier today. And the question was, I believe verbatim, is there anything the Knicks could do tonight that could get you to change your opinion about where they are and how things are looking after whatever, the opening however many days of the season, 6 days of the season? And do you remember what your answer to that question was, Jeremy?
I want to say it was no. John. And then you said, wow, you're just remarkably even keeled as always. And I said, yes. And you know what? I'm going to stick with that for the moment. I'm going to stay with my answer.
Are you really?
Because again, I am. Listen, I'm not trying to be like this is fine, guys, the world burns. It was embarrassing. It was just a disgusting second half. I mean, ultimately the whole game, really. But especially in the fourth quarter. But it's the sort of thing where, there are some glaring weaknesses that need to be addressed and some sloppy play as a whole. But again, like one of the things, what did I say, John? What did I say about trap games? And not just trap games, but these games against this type of opponent. Yeah. Do you remember?
Yeah, you said if again, I'm recalling because it was a whole 10 hours ago. If they go out and they beat the team tonight, this crappy Magic team, okay, they were supposed to win the game. If they lose the game, it was a trap game. And I think it's fair at this point to characterize this as a trap game with an asterisk that, like, when you take 48 3-pointers, which would have been a Knick regulation record had it not been for what happened literally two days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago now. And you make, was it 13? I think they made, whatever. They made 27%, whatever 27% is. I think 13. That has something to do with it as well. But yes, they approach this as a team who loses a trap game approaches a trap game. So you were right.
Yeah,
I guess. Were you right?
It's a sort of, I was. I at least I like to think I was. Because again, it feels like the only positive way that we could have come out of this was the Knicks blowing out the Magic like they did 2 days ago. Otherwise, it just feels like a disappointment. Of course, if they had won a close game, the Knicks eked out a 1, then it would have been great. You lick your wounds. You've escaped with the W, figure it out, but you got the W. It didn't happen here. Obviously, they lost. So, that it's a bummer. Obviously, it's one game. I'm upset, but it's not like this is a rabbit hole where I start falling. But I do think there's a serious point of attack defense issue, and I don't know how it gets solved because Kemba Walker isn't getting any younger. And we see he's not starting to close out games. It's going to be Derrick Rose, who, by the way, D Rose was 5 of 8 from 3. The Knicks, not named Derrick Rose, shot 20% from deep. And when you consider how much of a shot diet the Knicks are taking from 3, that is abhorrent. That is disgusting. And that can't happen, obviously. But I didn't understand Alec Burks being played.
I thought that was the one obvious. That was the one obvious
when you have Evan Fournier, who just went off in the previous game and the game before that, especially. Yeah. I don't know how you don't have an answer for Terrence Ross.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of answers out there for Terrence. When Terrence Ross gets going, the man scored 22 points in a quarter. That is, but he doesn't need a lot of when he's going like that. I don't know that there's a lot of guys in the NBA that could stop him.
Right, but still 22 in a quarter.
No,
I understand the zero part, but
I get it.
He erupted, and the Knicks did nothing. Yeah. I know you get it. Obviously,
it was a bad loss for all the reasons you just talked about. There was some second guessing. There was some terrible shooting. Julius Randle and Tom Thibodeau after the game said that they did not think the Knicks came out with the requisite amount of effort. The Magic clearly, after getting reamed by their coach, after showing up with no effort on Friday night, clearly came out with a bunch more effort. The Knicks did not match that. This was a game early. The Knicks were down by 6 early. They eventually took a 13-point second quarter lead and, could not maintain it because of some of the issues that we just talked about. I guess zooming out for a second, we're like, why are we re-recording this? We're re-recording this because we said pretty much nothing but glowing things about this team, whatever it was, 10 hours ago, right? And now we have to say some negative, like other than Kemba Walker having a brain fart in the last 90 seconds of the first game, the Knicks have played pretty much perfect basketball for 2 games, right? Or had played perfect basketball for 2 games. Yeah. And now they have not played perfect basketball, sure. Right? Okay. So that's why we're re-recording this. And I think the message is that this is just a normal NBA team. Normal NBA teams have games like this. I think where the part that I don't know if unnerved is the right word. That's not the right word because I'm not unnerved, but like the part that made tonight a little bit jarring is last season, the Knicks certainly lost some bad games or games where you're like, oh man, they really probably should have won that game and they lost it. Those games were pretty much exclusively early in the year. I want to say maybe like the Laker game late in the year that they lost was an exception. Maybe I'm forgetting one more game. Am I forgetting one more game? Like they look like poop against the Celtics in the last game of the season. They look like poop for a while against the Spurs towards the end. Oh, the Timberwolves game. Thank you, Adrian. That was another one.
Timberwolves. Yep.
Yeah, Timberwolves game. So like they had
a Holtz game. Right? Was it just the final 3 games of the season? They
didn't look good.
I know you mentioned the Celtics and the Spurs, but yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing though.
Yep.
They found a way to win those games. And that's what the Knicks, the second half of the Knicks schedule pretty much, or at least or at the very least, the final third of the Knicks schedule was characterized by the Knicks. This whole is greater than the sum of the parts, figuring out a way to win games that they did not win earlier in the year. However, here's the thing. I think their talent level increased because they traded for Derrick Rose. They figured out the rotation. They weren't playing Kevin Knox anymore, all these types of things. So, we got this sense that like, okay, this is all heading in a certain direction. And then tonight, Sunday night was like, oh, wait, no, they're still just a normal team that can lose a game like this. And I guess that to me, that's why it was worth coming on here and being like, all right, we need to kind of check ourselves and be like, yes, this team has an incredibly high ceiling, but they are also not infallible. But then again, I don't know how many teams are infallible in the league because like what's going on with the three perceived title favorites, the Lakers, the Bucks, and the Nets? They have 2 wins between them, right? Did the Bucks play tonight? Did they win or did they lose? Not. The Bucks lost again.
I don't believe they played at all.
Wait, or did they?
No, they didn't play tonight. No,
they didn't play. Okay, so the Bucks have 1 win. Did not play. The Nets have 1 win in which they needed to outscore the Sixers, whatever it was, 15-0 down the stretch, and the Lakers have 0 wins. So, and
at this moment, they're currently winning by 6 at halftime.
Okay, so maybe the Lakers maybe each of those teams will end this weekend with a win. We are not recording again if the Lakers win. Just throwing that out there.
3rd time's a charm. Oh, Bucks do have 2 wins. Okay, thank you, Andy.
Okay. But they also lost a terrible game in which they did not have their full allotment. But okay, so maybe the Bucks, the defending champions, are like the team that has their shit together completely. Everybody else, the Hawks look like shit. The Mavs look like shit. Like everybody has had a moment so far, except the Bulls, apparently, where they've looked like shit.
Do you remember the 3rd game of last season for the Knicks, by the way, John?
Wasn't that the game they beat the Bucks?
Yes, it was.
There you go.
I guess the point I'm making, and this isn't to say that the Magic or the Knicks of old or anything like that, but just like teams are figuring things out. It's not going on. And I think what you're saying is accurate in terms of this podcast. It wasn't like we were so over the top. Well, maybe now I'm thinking it was a glowing podcast. I'll put it that way.
No, but we didn't. What bad were we going to say?
That was the thing. It was like,
what did we have?
2 games.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some people might feel it's just 1 game. Some people might think it's egregious. And just the fact of the matter was for us to have this glowing podcast and then be met with a loss that, again, I mean, we didn't expect it. I think there's obviously always the idea of a trap game, but when you blow a team out by around 30 points in their home stadium and you're coming back, your first instinct is, I think they can win again. They didn't. And I think Cole Anthony had the game of his life. And again, like the point of attack defense, there needs to be something done about it. And I'm not entirely sure how it works, but that's why they have these are the early season struggles.
But that's the other thing, because you just threw out a specific thing. And before this game, not that anybody was thinking Kemba Walker was, who's the best defensive point guard in the NBA right now? Is it, I don't know. Is it Drew Holiday? Not that anybody was thinking Kemba Walker was Drew Holiday on defense, but it wasn't like a thing that we needed to dwell on, and now it's a little bit of thing that we need to dwell on. Thank you, Andrew. I'm not saying that out loud.
Frank Ntilikina. I'll say that's what Andrew.
Yes. In any case, like last season, we knew what the Knicks' issues were. Like their offense had a distinct stealing because they just didn't have a lot of guys who could do a lot of different things. Alfred Payton existed. And it was pretty simple. Like, again, before this game, we didn't really need to dwell on any specifics. And now it's like, all right, do we really need to dwell on is the Kemba point of attack defense, is like that going to be the thing that we go to? Like, I'm not quite there yet. I think I still love this team's approach. I love the fact that they took 48 threes tonight, because again, I think for the most part, most of those threes, if not a wide margin of those threes, were good shots. They just didn't go in from guys that I think are going to normally make them. Again, RJ Barrett was 1 for 7 from deep. Evan Fournier was 2 for 7 from deep. Alec Burks was 1 of 6 from deep. I don't think Emmanuel Quickley has made a 3 this year. He's probably made 1. I can't remember it.
No, he did. He definitely did.
He made 1.
The whole eye thing.
Oh yes, that's right. The pirate. Yeah. How could we forget the pirate? Silly me. In any case, he's struggled. Toppin was 0 of 3 from deep. Julius Randle was 2 of 10. Like, these are not guys who I'm going to worry about shooting whatever the hell they shot tonight. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of nights where all of them shoot whatever they shot tonight from deep. So again, if we're talking about like systemic issues or anything, I'm not there yet. Could we quibble about Tibbs played Alec Burks a handful of more minutes than he should have, as opposed to going with, going to Fournier? Sure. But at the same time, like my halftime Zoom with my newsletter subscribers, everybody was like, he's got to play the subs more. The subs got what it takes. The subs are where it's at. If he's going to want to win this game, he's got to play the subs more. Guess what? subs came in and gave up a 15-0 lead or 15-0 run in the second half. And it was all about, you got to get the starters back in there. Like, look, sometimes you just play like shit, and the Knicks did not play great tonight. One
of the things that I kind of picked up on during the game as RJ continued to struggle. I mean, again, he's 1 for his last 12 from 3
from deep.
And of course he went 3 of 7 the first game of the season. It reminded me almost exactly of last year.
Yeah.
Last year when he went 3 of 3 from deep first game, then 0 of 6, 0 of 4. And then after that, 0 of 3, 0 of 8, then 4 of 5. The bottom line, and then, he struggled again. And then he was one of the
highest
point
shooters
shooters
rough stretches. Yeah.
I'd say facetiously of all time, but yeah, exactly. So it's that sort of
from the corner. He had a pretty great season.
Right. Yeah. So if you're thinking like, this, that with RJ again, there's a similar pattern. Like even it's like a microcosm of his actual game throughout the season where he just starts off very cold in the first half, first quarter, whatever you want to call it. And then he just gets hot and he can do it. It didn't happen this game, obviously. I also wish Julius Randle didn't ISO quite as much. There were a lot of forced things, but yes, to me, it feels like a great meal that you've had. Like you go to a nice steakhouse, maybe. Everything's fantastic. The ribeyes medium rare. The steak frites are delicious. You got some nice spinach on the side. You feel a little hungry still after the meal. You order dessert and it's crap. Not physical crap, but it's just not good.
No, tonight they actually served you a lump of shit. That's what this game was.
Even so, offensive, especially if you had this nice steak meal. But regardless, does the dessert outweigh the beautiful steak meal that you just had? I don't think it does. I think you also have learned like, hey, maybe shit doesn't taste very good, and don't order that next time, or expect it next time, or never know. So,
Andrew, yes, indeed, a nice slice of humble pie. I hope I'm not breaking confidences here, but myself and Andrew and Bernard and Yash on our text chain were texting a few days ago about where this team's win total is going to wind up. And we were specifically talking about the first 16 games, which is before things get pretty hairy. And my fear was that they would emerge from the first 16 games with like 9 and 7, maybe 10 and 6. 10. I was like 10 and 6. I'll sign for 10 and 6. And I'm not going to name any names, but some people were like, oh no, 12 and 4, 11 and 5 at worst. And I'm like, it's the NBA. It's hard to go 5 games or 8 games, whatever it is, above 500 in a 16 game span. And the next 3 games they have coming up now, Philly, Chicago, New Orleans, like, again, if you lose to the Magic, you can lose to any of those teams. I'm not saying they will. They may win all 3 of those games, Jeremy, for your, something that may come up later. But I do think now after this game, it's like, okay, really gotta bear down, because this without question, this beginning portion of their schedule is something they need to take advantage of. So this is their one, this is their one mulligan, right? This is their mulligan. They don't get another one. I'm not saying they can't lose to, other teams that maybe they should beat, but like this one hurt. If you're someone, again, who was looking at the first 16 games and be like, this is going to set us up for success for the rest of the year. Because I'll tell you right now, if they come out of this first 16 and they're like 9 and 7, with what comes down the pike after that, it might be a little rough. That's the last thing I wanted to say.
Meanwhile, yesterday.
Let's quickly go back, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet about the Celtics game. I've spoken a lot about it. I think it's safe to say it was a memorable game. Well, let's go there. How memorable was it, Jeremy? Do you think, let's start with this. Is this the most memorable regular season game of your lifetime watching the Knicks?
No, I don't think so. I've been watching. Okay,
then what's better?
There were Knicks Heat games. I think, arguably when you look at the Knicks Heat game, or what was it, Knicks Cavs? Which one? There was, I can't even remember, which probably goes to show.
About when are we talking?
Well, like what, in 2013, did the Knicks go to Cleveland when LeBron, or 2014 when LeBron came home?
I mean, yeah, there were.
It was fun.
There were games that were big leading up to whatever the game was. I guess maybe I should have asked it differently. Given how the game transpired, because I think to me, this was actually, no, it's the second most regular season opener that I could remember. And my memory from the 90s is a little fuzzy. And I would go so far as to say, in terms of how the game played out, it was, I'm not going to give a air of importance because it's the first game of the season, but like in terms of just how crazy the game was and how people were feeling about it afterwards and talking about it afterwards, I think it's in my top 5 since the 90s at the very least.
Wow.
Do you want to hear my?
Sure, I would love to hear yours.
Okay, so I have a few that I thought of. So the first one I'm going to go is the most recent one. The win against Memphis last year, which I think we all agree is the biggest win of last season. Here's what I did. I had forgotten. So the Knicks record after they lost that game was 25-27. They were 2 games under 500. So that was April 7th of 2021. Indiana trailed them by a game, and Chicago trailed them by 2.5 games. So they were in very real danger of slipping to the plan. So I think that's one that goes on the list. Another one that I have that goes on the list, I think that's the biggest one from last season, so I'm not going to reference any other from last season. And then I'm just going to go back in receding order. I had to pick a game from the 2017-18 season because there was a hot minute there where we were like, Porzingis, Frank, Tim Hardaway Jr.
There's a buzz. Yeah, in the beginning.
So the game that I'm picking there is when they beat Indiana it was Frank had a big jumper, big 3. To go a game over 500. So they were 5-4. Big win there.
I think I was actually at that game.
Were you really?
I was. Yeah. No, I'm not thinking. There were 2 games where I think the other one was the Hornets game that season early on. And I was at the Pacers one, and it was a blast. And I remember walking out of there. I think I even tweeted it where it was like, I know this feeling isn't going to last because I don't think this team is for real, but man, it feels really good to have this type of winning. And it was great. And then of course it was not. But no, it was a great game. I remember vividly.
Yeah, I just remember the 3. I don't remember much about the rest of that game. The game, I don't know that I could pick one game from the 2012-13 season, but I am going to try. And it's the Thunder game that they won 125 to 120. Carmelo Anthony had 36 and 12 in that game. JR 22 off the bench. And then mentioned, I believe, on a podcast this week was the game that kind of started Linsanity when things were falling apart in 2011 and 12. And then that got things going. And then as far as season openers go, I think the 2012-13 season opener against the defending world champion Miami Heat, in terms of like setting the tone for the season, like, oh, wow, maybe this team is actually going to be pretty good. And then they started out 6-0. So those are the ones that I thought of. For
me, just quickly, I feel like that I agree with you that the Grizzlies game obviously was the turnaround point for the Knicks. But at that moment, because I think when we look back and be like, wow, that really was the point where everything switched, that's why it feels even better. I think if we're just looking at one game at the time for when we were watching it, for me, I think the best regular season game of last year was actually the Mavs game, the one that they went into Dallas and won. Just based on the energy, the emotions, what was at stake. You know, the Knicks are now finally on this winning streak. Julius Randle's coming home. It's Porzingis, all these things. It built up. It was a primetime game as well, nationally televised, similar to this in that sense. So that's why I think just single game.
And they lost the Mavs. What was it? A week or two before?
Destroyed in early April. Right. So and I say destroyed in the sense of like, that third,
it got away from them
so bad. In the fourth, I think they scored like 6 points in the first 6 minutes or something. So of the fourth quarter. Yeah. So I got to go with the Dallas game. Just if we're looking at that one game at the time, but I'm with you that in terms of last season as a whole, the Memphis game, I think turned everything around and should absolutely be considered the best game from a season standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know like what would have happened if they lost this game. I guess if they go on to have a terrible year, we could turn around and say it didn't matter. But I wonder if they go on to have a decent year, or better than decent year, whether we'll look back on that game as being more meaningful than maybe it even appears right now.
Well, how would you have felt if they had lost this game?
I mean, despondent. Is that a good word? I was on this podcast and I said I thought that game was huge because of the two Magic games to follow it up and the prospect of like you lose that game and you slip on one of these Magic games, and then the rest of the schedule over this first, I guess, fifth of the season has a couple of tough games. You know, you got the Philly games. Well, who knows at this point with how they've looked a little uneven, and the two Bucks games. But the rest of those games are games like they like. Maybe not evenly matched. Maybe the Knicks will be favored more of those like kind of in between games than not. But I was like, shit, if they ever started the season off 1-2, and then you start playing teams like, yeah, they kind of should beat the Bulls. Maybe they kind of should beat the Pelicans. Like, you know, well, Pelicans look like crap, but again, getting off track. I was just worried about a cascading effect. That's all.
That's fair. I think I just would have felt numb because this is a game that the Knicks should have won in regulation.
Yes.
And I'm not begrudging them because at the end of the day, the Knicks got the W. So that's fine. And it was just certainly more anxiety and stress that we had to go through at the end, but it was well worth it in the long run. But yeah, I think it would have just been like, okay, this is a game the Knicks should have won. There are things they're going to work on. And I think that's also a testament to let me throw it back at you because I certainly have my thoughts on it. If the Knicks had basically sleptwalked through this preseason, right? If they had not gone with the lineups that they did, with tinkering, with the minutes that they gave out to other players, do you think the Knicks are prepared for the Celtics game? Or do you think that they basically had to start working out kinks earlier in order to really get to the point where they could be better? Because for me, I think that they certainly have tried various things in the preseason. And they were like, for example, right? Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but Randall and Obi. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Randall and Obi. If the Knicks aren't down multiple big men for whatever reason, be it injury, foul trouble, do they try to go with this Randall Obi connection? And I really don't think they do. I think it took a depleted center position for them to finally say, hey, let's try this because it's better than putting Jericho Sims.
We'll get an answer to that as soon as the centers are healthy and they find themselves in a tight game in which they probably maybe will have a little trouble scoring, right?
100%. But that's my point where let's say, right, that Taj doesn't foul out and he's able to play. If the Knicks don't play Randall Obi, they don't know if it works or not. It could.
Oh, you're talking about the last preseason game when Taj fouled. Okay. Yeah, guys.
Right. So when Taj is out because the birth of his child. Congratulations, Taj. And Noel is still injured and Jericho Sims can only provide you so much.
Yeah.
Then without that fourth preseason game, the Knicks are kind of like, hope and a prayer against Boston by throwing Obi out. And the thing is, I feel like even though Bradley Beal did not play in the second half of that final preseason game, the Wizards are they're a better team than they used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
So the fact is that they were trying actively and they had still talent on the floor at the time. It's not like they threw in the white towel and said, or the
Raul Neto, baby.
Right.
World beater.
Exactly. But the Knicks were able to tinker with what they had and then it paid off in that final game. So to kind of go back to the original question, do you feel like that was important or do you feel like it doesn't really matter?
No, it was important. I think the entire preseason was important. I think how Tibbs approaches preseason games is important. I was, shouting this from the hilltops. I've been doing it for 2 years now. I guess the first thing I could think of when you're like, do you think they could have won that game if they didn't prepare the way they did? I'm like, well, where was the preparation in the last 90 seconds of the game when they almost pissed it away? And I don't think there's any explanation for that. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. I'm being a little facetious because I think that's just kind of one of those freak things that happens every now and then. But I think we can certainly look back at the preseason and say, and this goes for last year too, when Emmanuel Quickley started out, I believe he didn't even play at all in the first preseason game. And then he got like 7 minutes in the second preseason game. Third preseason game, he played a considerable number of minutes, and then he started the fourth one. And then that was the game against the Cavs where we're like, holy shit, they really have something here. Boom, right away, regular season, Tibbs is relying on Quickley. So I think these preseason games absolutely matter for him. And I think, we don't have to talk too much about Randall and Obi together, but I will say, or point out, hi, Andrew, that I was wrong. And I think Andrew was wrong too. I think you chimed in on this during halftime of the Orlando game when so for anybody who is not on the halftime Zooms, I predicted that we would not see Obi and Randall together in the second half because I thought that would be something that Tom Thibodeau saves for, a breaking case of emergency glass. We saw it a considerable amount, and we saw it. Maybe this is a good transition. We saw it maybe a little bit too much when he reinserted Randall back in at the end of the game to get some more time. And after the game, Tom Thibodeau said something to the effect of like, well, first he said that they had made a little run, but he also said we still have things to work on. What I took from that is that he's like, this is a thing he wants to go to in games that matter. And he still feels like, which we should have learned at the end of the preseason and which we're still learning now, he still feels like it needs work. I think that's a good sign for anybody, perhaps people on this podcast, who want to see Julius Randle and Obi Toppin play together more. Any comments from anybody in the peanut gallery?
It's Jeremy's turn. Yes, Jeremy, how do you feel?
No. Don't put the heat on me. Don't throw me under the bus because you're the one who's
I took my lumps the other day. Okay?
And you can take them again.
Didn't take any lumps.
No, you're the one that did a whole thing last time.
A whole thing. I just said, and I want to put out here that it is still correct in that I want to see Tom Thibodeau play Randall and Obi when they have healthy centers. Because the whole argument I had was, it's not that I don't think it doesn't work. It's that Tom just isn't playing it because of the fact that there are healthier fives. And so when that happens, I will absolutely say, you know what? I'm glad to be wrong. I'm glad they did this. But again, we have not seen a situation where the Knicks have had a deeper core at the five, or, more depth at the five for guys who've been healthy or active. And he still plays Obi over them. So,
can I defend both of you? I would not be
defend
shocked.
Me. Don't defend Andrew.
Oh, stop it. I have the same take.
It would not shock me in the least if once a center, in addition to Mr. Robinson, once another center is healthy, we don't see this thing for 5 games. Obi and Randall together would not shock me in the least. I'd be, again, pleasantly surprised if we did. I'm very happy about it. But both of you guys had the reasonable take. I'm the one who was out on the limb saying like, yeah, maybe, who knows? Maybe he gets crazy. But again, it's been out of necessity right now. So who the hell knows where the truth actually lies? I don't know.
I will say one thing just in terms of the Celtics game and even the preseason game before it. It feels like the Knicks still are woefully unprepared or underprepared in terms of late game execution, specifically on the defensive end, because the Wizards game, right? When Randall missed that free throw and then the Wizards tied it and the Knicks had to just play better defense. And then they wouldn't have been in that position where Randall had to hit a game winner over Gafford and they win, which again, like it's preseason. You figure these types of things out. Of course, they talked about how Jason Tatum slipped and that threw off confusion. And then there was a breakdown. And before you know it, Marcus Smart hits a 3 and Mike Breen is doing a double bang for the Boston Celtics on national television, which
it was not a double bang.
Core. Yeah, he said bang twice.
I thought there was a second bang.
There was a second bang.
It was a double bang.
Similar to the Kennedy assassination, there was a second bang. Anyways, sorry, it was right there.
For you, it was right there. Yeah. For 99 out of 100, 999 out of 1,000 of the people, that would not have been the thing that's right there.
Well, it was right there for me. So
that's why we love you. But don't act that what goes through your head is like, oh, this is what goes through everybody.
Well, what goes through JFK? Never mind.
Anyways,
God! I've left myself speechless. Anyways. So in terms of the late game execution, it's oh fuck.
You know what? Can we just move on?
Said execute. Oh my god!
Jesus, that one wasn't even
okay. Reset, Jeremy. Your thoughts on basketball?
Anyways, it's to go back to our main point here. The Knicks are getting this done. They're messing up at the wrong time, but at the right time in terms of the schedule. Whereas a game that doesn't matter. And then
it's early. It's early. Yes.
And then you hope that they build on that. So.
Okay. Moving on. How do you?
So John, you want to see more minutes of Obi and Randall together?
Speaking of minutes, transition.
It's not your first rodeo.
This is not. I'm not a novice. In any case, so yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this if that's okay. I just, so for anybody again who may have turned off the TV at the end of the Magic game because there was the first Magic game because it was a 30-point whatever lead. Tom Thibodeau reinserted Julius Randle with about 6 minutes. Not about, I know what it is. It's 6 minutes and 51 seconds to go. 6 minutes 41 seconds to go, and the Knicks are up by 24. Can an NBA team come back from 24 down at 6 minutes and 40 seconds? Sure, it's possible. Was this the Magic team that was going to do it? I'm not so sure. So there was a little bit of criticism. I joined in on the criticism. I said, that I didn't think there was a reason for Randle to be in there. Sure enough, a couple minutes later, there's a flagrant foul. Randle ended up being fine. But, I think as a result of this, there was some discussion about on the good old Twitterverse about, things are going good. Why do we have to criticize, right? Why do we have to pick nits at anything right now? Because, we have a head coach who has cleaned up things and the whole thing. And let's be happy and I guess enjoy every win for what it is, as opposed to trying to poke holes. And I'll be honest with you. I think there's some validity to that line of thinking because I think back to last season, and Andrew was my witness. How many times would I get annoyed on post games where people were like, "Why the fuck is Elfrid Payton playing 25 minutes for this team? I don't get it." And my view was like, "Look, they're winning. Like Thibodeau, maybe he knows something that we don't. Maybe there's some stuff in the locker room. Maybe this, maybe that." And then I thought about this. I'm like, well, who gets to decide like when it's okay to criticize and like when it's okay not to criticize? Like, I guess the point is it's always okay to criticize. I do think there to some extent should be a trust in the process, as it were. But I don't know. I don't know whether I have a concrete thought on any of this. Jeremy, what are your thoughts, if any?
Time is a flat circle. Like we had this conversation last year because it seemed like there were times where there would be valid criticism of Tibbs, and that's not doubting his abilities. That's not saying that he, doesn't know what he's doing, that
or that he's a bad coach or he's wrong coach.
It's none of that. Yeah. It's just like, again, if Tibbs's whole thing is, I'm never happy, he's always looking for reasons to tinker and to make the product better, then why is it that we can't have the same philosophy? Why is it that we can't say, well, listen, we would have done something differently? Yeah. And I think that's the disconnect with Twitter, right? It's like, we would have done this differently. Well, are you saying that he doesn't do things right? Are you saying that, are you arguing and saying he's wrong? Yeah. No, it's just, here's a passing thought in so many characters without me having to extrapolate. And even if I did extrapolate and I did a thread, people might gravitate more towards the first tweet and then they go off of that. And it's like, no, it's in the thread. That's what I'm saying. And it's implied. I'm basically just picking at this one thing that I would do differently. And that's, I think, the issue just in general. That's often why I try to just do jokes on Twitter. It's very hard to be detailed. It's hard to extrapolate from there or expand. And it just becomes tricky from that. But I'm with you. Again, I think that there's something to be said where, yes, we saw the Celtics come back, right? But it took Jaylen Brown going off and having one of the greatest performances I've seen in a season opener, certainly.
Greatest in Celtics history for a season opener, which, right. It's quite a history there.
Right. Like, think about that Celtics game. It took him hitting a three from like almost 40 feet away in order for them to make it a one possession game. Is Jalen Suggs going to hit that shot and make it a one possession game? Probably not. I understand why. Listen, there was a game 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. Maybe what might have been last year between the Kings and the Wolves, and the lead that I think.
Oh, I know the game you're talking about. I think it was last year.
It evaporated and it ended up in a loss. And I understand that. But there's also something to be said of, you can get it to a point where you're killing them. But also this Magic team is not a contender. And I understand that in that Wolves and Kings games,
putting it lightly,
was either. But it's the sort of thing where you could probably get away with it. Is it the sort of thing where it's so aggravating that we're going to be super upset about it and harp on it? No. And that's not what you were doing either. Yeah. It's sort of thing just like, hey, if this team sucks that they're playing, they have nothing to play for. There are more fans in their own stadium that are Knicks fans than there are Magic fans. This is basically a home game. This is going to be fine. So I would have taken out Randle a little bit earlier. there's no problem here. And I think you could agree to that too. It's just a passing thought that has now turned into something bigger, which is silly.
I agree. There's arguments on both sides. And just to be very clear, my quibble, it's a new word of the day, is with the fact that not about an extra minute or two, because I'm not someone who believes an extra couple of minutes is a big deal, but specifically the tenor of that game had gotten very chippy. And I was like, when he went back in, I'm like, this something doesn't feel right about this. And sure enough, it almost ended badly, but thankfully it didn't, and we can move on. Want to do predictions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Andrew, who's going to go first?
Who would like to go first?
Well, I would just like to point out that
it's the first week. Are you the defending champ?
I did do much better job of predicting last year. So I think I do deserve the right to have first dibs on this.
You won the crown last year, I'm sure, probably. You could go first. So this week's games. So we're predicting the game that will have already happened by the time you're listening to this, the second Orlando game, as well as the game at home against Philadelphia on Tuesday, and then back-to-back road games at Chicago on Thursday, and then at New Orleans on Halloween Eve, Saturday night, as it were.
Are we dressing up next Sunday?
It's a good question. I don't even know what I'm dressing up for.
I mean,
actual Halloween.
For the pod, yeah. That's Halloween.
I'm going to have a costume. I haven't gotten it yet. I don't know what it's going to be, but I will obtain a costume. So if you'd like me to wear said costume for said pod,
yes,
I will do it.
For maybe not for the whole pod, because I got in trouble for having that Red Sox shirt or that Boston shirt up for the entire pod. And everybody was mad at me, including Jeremy. It was hilarious.
Did a great job of it.
Everybody did a great job, and I'm happy with myself for also doing a great job. Regardless, we should only temporarily put up the costumes, and then I don't know, take your Michael Myers mask off and do the rest of the pod normal. You know what? I'm going back to, I'm zigging. I want Jeremy to go first for the predictions. Oh, it's fine. Go zig away. Jeremy, go first.
Well, I know why he's doing it, because he knows what I'm going to pick.
I actually don't even really care what you're going to pick, because I'm just tossed up between, there's only two choices that I want, and I don't even want to have to make the choice between those two choices. So I'll let you make the choice between those two choices.
Well, that was the other option. Okay. Well, I'm going to go 3-1 because you'll take the other one.
That's what you were going to do. Okay.
Which again, I think there's a legitimate chance that for the one you pick, that it will be successful. Obviously, that would mean the Knicks are 6-0, which is phenomenal. But I'm just going to, say there's one off night in the span of 4 games. And, also if for some crazy reason the Knicks go 2-2, which I really hope they don't, then I'm covered. So, John, why don't you go ahead and state what your answer will be?
Oh, so you're assuming that I'm going to pick 4-0.
Actually, I was. Are you not? Are you picking 2-2?
So here's the thing. I'm looking at the games that my original gut instinct was great. It's either 3-1 or 2-2. And now I'm looking at the games. I'm like, okay, Orlando, that's a win. Should be a win. New Orleans has looked really bad through, I believe they've played 3 games. They were 0-3. Mm-hmm. That should be a win. Then you got Philadelphia and Chicago. Chicago has looked pretty good. The Knicks are going on the road to Chicago to play in Chicago. Should they still win that game? Yeah, maybe. They're not going to be favored in it. They're also not going to be favored at home against Philadelphia, unless like Joel Embiid doesn't play. But I'm assuming he's going to play because we have no indication as of now that he is not going to play. So here I'm going to recharacterize what I said before. I think 3-1 was the obvious pick by far. It was the most obvious pick. I need to go 2-2. I'm still not. I don't know. I think this team still has a kink or two to work out, and I'm not gonna lie. The end of the Boston game scared me a little bit.
Sure,
that's all.
That makes sense. But I'll say this: I don't want to put down Chicago because I'd be talking out of both sides of my mouth if I said, "Hey, look at the Knicks and the schedule and blah blah blah," and I say, "Well, the Bulls, look at the teams they played." The Bulls did a great job of beating the Pistons
twice
last night. They also beat them. They were losing, in the first half against them.
It was a close game in the fourth quarter, and then Chicago pulled away towards the end. Yeah,
right. And then the second game they played, it was also against an inferior opponent, right?
I believe so. I'll look it up right now. But yeah, no, I think Chicago has not played really any quality.
They played the teams on
New Orleans.
Thank you.
There you go.
So we just okay. So again, it's very possible that the Bulls could be certainly better. Again, they did a really nice job of in the second half beating down a Pistons team that did not have Cade Cunningham. But again, I'm still, at least the Knicks kind of can hang their hat on the fact that there was a double-digit lead against the Celtics when Jaylen Brown was going off. They squandered it. How can they learn from that? How can they get better? So I'm with you. I think that, again, there's a very distinct possibility that the Knicks lose that game to the Bulls, especially if it's in Chicago. But I'll take my chances with 3-1, and I'm glad you're going with 2-2, especially because if the Knicks go 4-0, I get to be doubly happy.
Well, here's the thing. If the Knicks go 4-0, I'm not going to give a shit about the fact that I picked 2-2 because the Knicks will at that point be 6-0 and we'll all be like, I don't know, planning ticker tape parades. If they do go 2-2, then I'm going to look awfully smart. So I'm the one who can't lose. All right, Andrew, it's your time to shine.
Well, Producer's Corner. I wanted to just throw some NBA headlines at you guys and see what your reactions are. Steph Curry on Friday night had 45 on 25 shot attempts, including 8 of 13 from threes, and he's gotten double-digit rebounds in both of his first 2 games. My question, would either of you like to adjust your pick for MVP this year? Because now he's the second best odds at plus 600.
So who's the leader now?
Luka, still plus 475. Still Luka. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, they did the Mavs did win on Saturday night against the aforementioned Raptors. I think I picked Giannis. Do I want to adjust?
You picked Luka.
Yes.
You picked Luka, and
I did.
Jeremy picked Giannis.
Okay. Well, they were my 1 and 2, and I felt strongly that they were the 2.
Giannis plus 650 also, so it's not like this is crazy to say. And Kevin Durant plus 650. So those are your 4 best: Luka, Steph, KD, Giannis, with Joel Embiid at plus 1,000 at 5th, 10-1.
Do I want to adjust my pick?
While you're thinking, I'm going to say no. I'm going to stick with Giannis. As good as Steph is, and he's just incredible, and I think that the Warriors will be a better team, especially when Klay comes back. But no, I'm going to stick with Giannis. I think he deserves the right in that sense. Not saying Steph doesn't, obviously, but there's something remarkable about Steph being 33 years old and winning an MVP. That'd be pretty cool. But right, he is 33.
He's up there. I think
32 or 33.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Regardless, the fact that I don't even look at age at this point because these guys keep defying age as we keep watching the NBA. He's a 1 of 1, and as the years go by, the narrative of him winning another one this later in his career, after people thought that his peak was potentially done, is there. The narrative of him winning like 52 games with this Warriors team is, potentially on the table.
Can I just, we're a long ways away from Klay coming back. Maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's January. We don't really know. I just want to read off their upcoming schedule very quickly. At Sacramento, at Oklahoma City, Memphis home, Oklahoma City home, Hornets home, New Orleans home, Rockets home, Atlanta home. I'm not.
Oh yeah! Wow,
this is not a misprint. Wolves home, Bulls home, at Charlotte. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 straight games they will be favored in, barring anything crazy. And what are they going to go? Are they going to go 8-3? Are they going to go 9-2 in that stretch? Then they have a tough game in Brooklyn, and then again at Cleveland, at Detroit, home for Toronto, home for Philly. Who knows what's going to be going on? Portland, and then the schedule gets a little bit tougher. We know these awards are narrative based. If the narrative is such that, holy shit, Steph has the Warriors, 16-4 without Klay, and then there's your MVP. Yeah, fuck it, I'll switch. I think Steph Curry's the MVP.
And this is not on Patreon, but thank you to our patrons out there. Thank you so much for your contributions so far. We passed 200 patrons last week, so thank you for that. And we will have an episode with John, Bernard Ozrowski, and Yash Monjanith recapping the NBA 75, which I guess, Jeremy, we really haven't gotten your take on this. Do you have a take on the NBA 75? Any snubs you saw? Did you care about the list?
Dwight Howard should have.
Dwight Howard, yes.
I think there's a good conversation for Clay as well. I don't think Dame probably should have been on it. It's also tough. This is the biggest thing for me, is that comparing eras is so challenging because we're also very much, there's recency bias, and also the game just continues to change. But, if you see great players in the 60s, and then you have someone who 10 years ago was also in the MVP conversation, then how do you compare the two? It's really tough. So, but no, I think, again, it's hard to put someone on without taking someone off. So the easiest one, in my opinion, is putting Dwight on there, taking Damian Lillard off. Other than that, pretty good for the most part. I think it would have been nice to see Bernard King on there too, but it's tough. There's 75 players, and there are a whole lot of them who have played in the NBA. So there'll always be some snubs.
I didn't like how many players and voting members admitted how little they took on this. That is just my only thought.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Clyde said during the game on Friday that it took him a whole day. Meanwhile, John spent 3 weeks on his list. Kendrick Perkins
longer than that. I spent longer than that.
But the point is, this should have been something studied and researched. And I think a lot of these voters were like, how do I feel about these guys? Hence why, Dame gets in, AD gets in, and Dwight Howard, who is universally unliked in NBA circles, did not make it.
Yeah. I have other thoughts. I'll save them. Save them for the Patreon.
Kendrick Perkins said it took him an afternoon. Carry the hell on.
Kendrick Perkins was one of the voters?
Yes.
I didn't even realize that. Wow. Okay.
Or if he didn't, let me actually fact check myself that he was one of the voters. Just know he said he did a list. And it took him an afternoon.
Okay.
Regardless, this is something that we're potentially doing an NBA, a Knicks 75, Jeremy. And I was like, oh, so for this Wednesday? And Dan's like, no, I need months to prepare for this. It's like, okay, that as much as I would love to have the content, I appreciate the actual thoughts that is going into these exercises.
I wanted months to prepare my top 75 for the NBA. And if I had a little bit more time, I probably would have made an adjustment or two. But whatever, I'll stand by my list. I think it was fine. In any case, yeah. An afternoon.
Yeah, an afternoon.
Okay. Anything else, or we're good?
I think we're good. Oh, can I give one quick shout out?
Yeah.
Today, when you guys are listening, and when this one person is listening, happy birthday to my dad, Pastor Claudio. Thank you he's been jumping on your live streams lately.
Really?
Yeah, he's been chiming in the chats, and just go Knicks, because that's all he is really going to contribute. But yeah, shout out to Papa Claudio, and I'm heading back to Long Island tomorrow night to do some Texas Roadhouse is the universal place my family goes to for every birthday dinner. So, biscuits and steak on me tomorrow night, Dad.
Happy birthday, Pastor Claudio. I haven't met you in person yet, but I look forward to doing that at some point.
You did send his wife a very nice note, because she is a Ewing Tier Patreon patron. So I made sure I quantified it. Don't worry, John.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Claudio. Thank you, Andrew Claudio. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And of course, thank you everybody out there for checking out another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Don't forget, rate, review, subscribe if you haven't already done so. As always, we will be doing live streams after every game on YouTube, and then flipping those around for the podcast shortly thereafter. But on behalf of Jeremy Cohen and Andrew, I will be seeing you soon. Have a good week.